Doug Dubitsky. He needs to get elected.
And it's my pleasure to introduce to you the next congressman from the state of Connecticut's 2nd Congressional District, Doug Dubitsky.
Thank you, folks. I really appreciate you coming out today. It really means a lot to me. As you may know, today is the last day of our federal reporting period. That means that today is the day that cuts off the report that we have to file to say how much money we raised. And some people in politics seem to think that it's very important how much money you raise, because they determine, they look at it and say, well, depending on how much money you raise, that determines whether or not you're a viable candidate. Whether or not that's true, some people believe that. So one of the things that we need to do is to have a good showing on our quarterly report. So I knew that this deadline was coming up pretty soon, and I knew that there would be people at fundraisers that I would have to ask for money, and I hate asking people for money. And I asked my wife, well, how do I ask people to give money to a campaign and give money to me? They don't really know me that well. A lot of people are asking them for money. And how do I implore on people the importance of winning in November? And my lovely wife over here in the pink dress, Marita, said to me what seemed pretty obvious, but I hadn't thought of it. She said, well, why don't you tell them why you're running? So I was like, okay, well, I guess I should have thought of that. Why don't I just tell you why I'm running? Okay? Well, I'll tell you why I'm running. But first I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent, and I hope you'll bear with me a minute. There's a comedian named Dennis Miller. Some of you may know him. He used to be on Saturday Night Live. Well, he has a radio show, and I don't know if it's broadcast around here, but I hear it on the internet. And Dennis Miller, his humor is a bit too eclectic for me. I half the time don't understand what he's talking about. He tells jokes about the battleship Potemkin and the Pythagorean theorem and things like that. I'm like, those are jokes? I sometimes 10 minutes later I understand the joke. But one thing he has on his radio show, he interviews Gold Star parents. Gold Star parents are the parents of soldiers who are killed in action. Most of the time it's Iraq and Afghanistan. Sometimes it goes back to Korea, Vietnam, but all of the time they're parents of kids that were killed in action. And he has a little segment where he says, brag on your kids a little bit. And these parents talk about who their kids were and what their kids believed in. And sometimes they recount these unbelievable acts of bravery under horrific conditions, where these kids men and women, and I say kids, but everything from 18 up. Sometimes they're older than me, because that's what our military is these days. But every time the parents will, with unbelievable courage, talk about how their children stood up in the face of adversity and why they did it. And they did it because they knew that our country was in danger. And they stood up for the country. They stood up for our freedom. They stood up, and the acts of bravery that they exhibited were because they knew that there was an enemy that was trying to do us harm. And I think of those people all the time because they saw a danger to the country and they stood up. And they wanted to make sure that that danger wouldn't come here, so they went to it.